What's up, guys? Welcome to the next Crack a Pack episode. Today we're opening up for what feels like the millionth time a pack of Shadows Over Innistrad. Obviously we're gonna get new sets, that's just normal. They're a little bit less exciting than some of these other sets that we get to open, but still very, very cool. There's actually one of my favorite cards right now, Tireless Tracker, is sitting at the top of the value list at $12. We also have Relentless Dead, Sorin, a number of other decent cards, nothing too exciting, but Get Rug Monsters in here, Nahiri, Thing in the Ice, a lot of cool stuff. So hopefully we get something awesome, but as always, we're going to do our best to look at this from a draft perspective, so we'll determine what our pack one, pick one would be. Of course, I'm not a great drafter, so I will do the best I can. I actually didn't draft much of Shadows either, so we'll see what we can do, but let's jump right into it. Angelic Purge is our first card. Sorcery, 2 and a white. As an additional cost to play it, you sacrifice a permanent and you exile target artifact, creature, or enchantment. This card actually is pretty okay. I think it's actually really good because it does exile. Obviously, yes, you have to sacrifice a creature. That's not great. Excuse me, a permanent. But I do think, you know, if you throw a land away late game or something like that, it's not a big deal. And if you're at board stall anyway and one of your creatures is going to die, maybe just sacrifice it to this and get rid of the opponent's big creature, you know? So I think there's a lot of room for this card to be really, really fantastic. And the fact that it exiles is actually very relevant. A lot of zombies and things like that. And so getting around some of those is great. So I do like that card. Press for answers. Sorcery for 1 and a blue. Tap target creature. It does not untap during its controller's next untap step. And you also investigate, which says put a colorless clue artifact token onto the battlefield with pay 2, sacrifice this artifact, and draw a card. Clue tokens were very, very useful in Limited, honestly. I think they were actually very, very good. This card seems decent. It's not amazing. I feel like I wouldn't be super excited to play it, but that's mainly because it's not instant speed, actually. I feel like, I don't know, you could get away with this, you could really make this awesome if it was instant speed. I do think at sorcery speed it's still actually quite good, and the fact that it leaves a clue token behind with the investigate trigger is just great. Added value, I like the Purge better, but definitely still a good card. Inquisitor's Ox is a 2/5 for 3 and a white. It has Delirium, so it gets +1/+0 and Vigilance, excuse me, as long as there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard. Delirium being a very powerful mechanic as well, definitely very useful and limited. This is like okay. I don't know, I'm not usually a fan of more toughness over more power. I'd rather have the more power over more toughness most of the time. Usually in Limited, and the reason I say that is because you're really trying to punch through for damage and win a board stall, or just have a more powerful board state. Having something like this, while if you can trigger Delirium, is very, very good. But if it's just a 2/5, it's just going to be blocking for days, which is fine. That's good. And it definitely does a very good job of that. But I want to be a little bit more proactive. So for that reason, not the biggest fan of that card. Shard of Broken Glass is an artifact equipment for 1. The equipped creature gets +1/+0. Whenever it attacks, you may put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. The equip cost is also 1. This is a bit more of a setup card. It's like filler in my opinion. It's not great. It does have synergies, obviously, Delirium being the most obvious of those. Being able to sort of chuck a few cards into the graveyard, hopefully be able to trigger Delirium off of that is not a bad way to go, but I don't know, it doesn't feel like it does that much, and I feel like in the long game this could actually hurt you more than it would actually help you. I think Delirium is easy enough to trigger just off of normally playing cards, and so I'm not the biggest fan of that. Gone Missing is 4 and a blue for a sorcery. Put target permanent on top of its owner's library, and then you investigate, and we already talked about what that is, not going to go over it again. But this is actually a good card. I like this. Put something, any permanent, which is definitely useful, on top of the owner's library. That's a very powerful ability because, especially if you're doing it late game, which this is a 5-drop, so it's going to be later game, remove their big bomb, put it on top of their deck, and then they basically have to draw, have to replay. It sets them back in tempo. It's a very, very good tempo swing. Not to mention, this has the added bonus of the investigate trigger, which is obviously very, very useful. Gives you a little bit of extra card draw, which is definitely helpful in Limited in general. And so I do like this card, probably still not more than the Purge, honestly. I like the exile clause on this just so much. So for that reason, I'm not going to pick it over that. Mulgraf Scavenger is a 0/4 for 1 and a green, and it has Delirium. It gets +3/+0 as long as there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard. This is, I feel like, not very good. A lot of times this could just be in the early game a 0/4, which just is going to be blocking. Again, not a bad way to go, especially if you're selling for something bigger, which in green you probably are, but I feel like I'd rather have something a little bit more proactive. I do think a 3/4 for 2 is great, but if you do have Delirium, it's probably mid to late game, and there's probably more you can do than just drop a 2 mana 3/4. Hopefully you can drop something a little bit bigger even, maybe a turn 5, beater, something along those lines. That being said, this is definitely a decent creature, but I'm still sticking with the Purge. I think that's a better card. Crow of Dark Tidings is a 2/1 for 2 and a black. It has flying. When it enters the battlefield or dies, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. This is the kind of card I like. It's an enabler, but it's also just a flying evasive early game threat. Obviously, it's something they're going to have to deal with. It is pretty easy to deal with, but you're kind of okay either way if it dies or if it sticks around for a while, because you get that bonus. You really want to trigger that Delirium. This is the kind of card to do it. I do like it. I feel like it's not quite as powerful as the Purge in the long game. I might be wrong in saying that, by all means, but for now I'm still going to stick with the Purge. Sanguinary Mage is a 1/3 for 1 and a red, and it has Prowess. Pretty straightforward card. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. I don't really like cards like this. 1/3s are notoriously not my favorite thing in Limited, because again, they have a big butt, but they don't deal much damage. Prowess kind of gets around that, right? Like if you have some instants or sorceries, you're going to be able to pump this up. Even some artifacts. It doesn't necessarily have to be just an instant or sorcery in that regard, but I feel like because you're relying on other cards to make that good, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be what you want it to be or what you're expecting it to be. And so for that reason, I really don't like that. Not my kind of card by any means. Hope Against Hope is 2 and a white for an enchantment aura. You enchant a creature, it gets +1/+1 for each creature you control. As long as the enchanted creature is a human, it has first strike as well. This is a powerful card. Especially if you can really ramp up your human count. This is great. Just a go wide, pretty curved out humans deck would be really stoked to have something like this. And having first strike is pretty relevant. Normally I don't like enchanted creatures, and I still don't. This is not the kind of card I would want to first pick, because it really forces you to want to do the human trick or just go really wide with as many things as you can. That being said, I do think this card has a home in Limited. It's just not something that I'm interested in first picking. Epitaph Golem, excuse me. 3/5 for 5, and you can pay 2 and put target card from your graveyard on the bottom of your library. This is a really interesting card. This is actually good in some commander decks, but I don't really like it in Limited. It's a 3/5 for 5, which is just not very good, and putting cards on the bottom of your library in Limited really doesn't seem like an abusable kind of a thing, and so for that reason, I just don't think this is quite good enough. Skeleton Key is 1 artifact equipment. The equipped creature has Skulk, which means it can't be blocked with creatures with greater power. And when the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. This is, again, just a lot of setup on one creature. Obviously, the equip cost is 2, I should also mention. So you're investing 3 mana to give something Skulk and then hope it gets through for damage, but it doesn't actually give it a boost in attack, power and toughness or anything like that. Yes, the Skulk makes it difficult to block, which is great, but if they just use a removal spell, much less exciting. I'm not a fan of this card just in general. I usually am not a huge fan of equipments, although I do like them better than enchant creatures, and so I'm not really a fan of that. To the Slaughter is our rare. It's an instant for 2 and a black. Target player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. If there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, instead that player sacrifices a creature and a planeswalker. Definitely a powerful removal spell. Gets around hexproof, which is the biggest nemesis for people in Limited. I do like it. I don't know if it's up there with the Purge, only because this is targeted. This you make them sacrifice, so if they just have another random creature, they just sacrifice that versus their big bomb, which you're actually trying to get rid of. The only upside being, obviously, it hits planeswalkers as well as hexproof creatures. So I do kind of like that. Autumnal Gloom, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, is a 2 and a green for an enchantment. Pay black, put the top card of your library into your graveyard. If you trigger Delirium, you can transform this, we do have a foil also, into Ancient of the Equinox, which is 4/4 with trample and hexproof. This is an interesting card. I don't think this is... I don't know though, like a 4/4 hexproof is quite good. I'm gonna keep that to the side for a second. We do have a foil here. Ulrich's Kindred is a 3/2 for 2 and a red. It has trample, and you can pay 3 and a green. Target attacking wolf or werewolf gains indestructible until end of turn. Not a very exciting card, in my opinion. So yeah, it's kind of between these three. I weirdly like this card. I know it takes a lot of setup, and enchantments really are not my favorite thing. But it does flip into just a 4/4 trample hexproof, and this is a very difficult card to deal with, especially pre-sideboard, when most decks are probably not going to run too much enchantment hate. That being said, I feel like Angelic Purge is also just a really, really solid removal spell, as well as To the Slaughter, but probably not so much. I feel like it's between these two. I feel like the safe pick is Angelic Purge. I might be wrong though, but I think that would be what I pick. Let me know though, if you would pick the Ancient, I feel like that could be really, really good. Just the fact that it's a 4/4 trample and hexproof is kind of insane. And it does come down on turn 3, which means, and it enables Delirium on its own, so there are definitely ways that you can abuse this. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Please make sure to leave a like on this video as well if you did enjoy it. We didn't get too much value in this pack, but it is still fun to open. I actually really liked Shadows Over Innistrad, so stoked to see it here on the on the Crack-a-Pack episode, excuse me. With that though, I'm gonna get out of here. Please make sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next Crack-a-Pack video.